place for you here?
Okay.
All right. Okay, do you want to do it?
You know what? I'll drive there with you, and I'll drive back with Debbie.
Okay. Interment will be at Whitehaven Memorial Park. The family will be gathering for Shiva, Motzei Shabbat from 7 to 9, Sunday from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9, Monday 2 to 4, 7 to 9, Tuesday 2 to 4, 7 to 9, and Wednesday, the last day of Shiva, 2 to 4, 7 to 9 at 43 Toby Court in Pittsburgh for friends to call. If you further wish to honor the memory of Bruce A. Green, you may do so by making contributions to the Alzheimer's Association, Hadassah, Temple Beth El, or the charity of your choice. It is now my honor to call upon Temple Beth El Senior Rabbi, Rabbi Ben Goldstein.
Before I forget, if you brought that thing in here with you, it's fine. The extra appendage we all have, this thing, it's okay. Just please make sure that it's off or on silent. When someone dies in Judaism, every life is different and every person is remembered differently. But the Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean praise is the judge of truth. So we're going to begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. Please repeat these words of blessing after me. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. And in English, that means praised is the judge of truth. In the words of Kohelet, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. It feels like some of us were just here yesterday, but it was actually 2 days ago. And I mentioned that there's very little fixed liturgy that has to be said at a funeral. There are some psalms, though, that have become synonymous with funerals. One of them is Mizmor LeDavid, the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsor, B'nodesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinhaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'ma'aglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit sal mavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha u'mishantecha hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sararai, dishanta b'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Goodness and mercy. I didn't have a chance to know Bruce. I've heard stories about him, and I've heard the wonderful life that he led and legacy he leaves behind. Over the course of the lifetime, you'll meet a lot of people. If your life is a blessed one, you'll be lucky enough to meet people like Bruce Green. And our world is a better world for having had him in it. I'm sure you'll hear a lot about his work accomplishments, but I have to say it, and we can say it as many times as we want. There are over 20 patents associated with his name in the field of medicine and the treatment of diseases. Think about how one life affects thousands, if not millions, of others. As we go through our lives, all of us will become known for one or more of our characteristics, our traits, our accomplishments. And sometimes they're important. Sometimes 20-something patents is important. And just as important is the humor and the love they shared. The ability that when someone, I guess, was it belches, that he says, what was it? Good one, right? When we lose someone, we don't really remember the statistics of their life, the job they had, or the degrees they earned. We remember the moments we shared with them. We remember the look in their eyes when they laughed and the sound of their voices when they called our names. The rabbis of the Mishnah ask a series of rhetorical questions, the first being, who is it who is truly rich? One who is happy with what they have. If that's true, then Bruce is one of the wealthiest people to walk the face of the earth. And looking at his family, a man married to the love of his life whom he met dancing at the JCC, who had children he adored, and more than one community, but this community in particular that loved him and his family so much. Whether they were living here or a new city or here or wherever they were back and forth from, a community that embraces and loves. In the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel, we see a beautiful exchange between Eliyahu, the prophet, and his student Elisha. Eliyahu says to Elisha before he knows his time is coming to an end, and he says to his student Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha answered, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass on to me." Well, Bruce made sure that his children got some of his spirit. He was a man who stressed the importance of education, a man who, if you were playing Trivial Pursuit, you wanted him on your side, a man who loved life. Jordana and Matthew, I'm not sure if you've ever been told, you're just like your father. Maybe you were and you shrugged it off, or maybe a little bit embarrassed. But what we come to realize as children, as the children of these amazing people, is that if we're lucky enough to even get a single portion of their spirit, we'll be blessed to become kinder, better, and stronger people. Martha, you have been in the kitchen preparing kiddushes, right? Is that? Because when I first met Martha, before I even knew her name, I would walk into the kitchen every once in a while. It wasn't every week, though I should, to all of you who make our kiddush every week, thank you. And I remember the first thing I remember before I knew your name was the smile you had while you were working in the kitchen. I had no idea the burden you were carrying. Martha, we know how much you loved Bruce. We know that your life together was a beautiful one and that you're going to miss your best friend and your confidant. We know how lovingly and beautifully you cared for him and took care of him while he was struggling with the awful disease. Jordana and Matthew, we know how much you miss your father and what he meant to you. Nothing I or anybody can say today will take that pain away. I only hope that you can hear the words that are said today, the words of comfort, and know that all of us here today in this community love you, and we pledge to be there for you and to help you through this horrible time. Tehei nishmato tzror b'tzor ha'chaim. May the soul of Bruce Green, of Beryl Yisrael, Ben Yitzchak v'Rachel be bound up in the bond of life. Yehi zichro baruch. May his memory be a blessing. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldstein. It is now my honor to call upon Jordana and Lois to speak.
It is my honor to be here today to share some memories about my dad. He was larger than life, and though it's impossible to summarize him even remotely succinctly, I shall endeavor to try. My parents, who celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary this past June, were married right here in 1985. Their partnership was filled with adventure, wine tasting clubs, swing dance classes, lots of travel and volunteering. In the late 80s, they helped resettle refugees from the former Soviet Union, and in a poignant twist, one of the refugees' fathers lived across the hall from Dad at the Jewish home this year. Our family's Jewish traditions were central to our lives, echoes of my dad's strong Orthodox upbringing. I was named and bat mitzvahed here. I haven't stood on this bima since my bat mitzvah. And many of my earliest memories take place in this building or at the JCC, always with the comfort of knowing that my dad was nearby. He brought these places home every night because while some parents sang nursery rhymes as lullabies, Dad used to sing me Jewish ritual songs, including the Shema. We were a Saturday Shabbat family, a tradition that began when I was just 6 months old. We came every single week on Saturday mornings until I was 18. It's one I didn't always appreciate as a teenager, especially because we also had non-negotiable Friday night Shabbat dinners. As a parent, Dad could be strict, especially about academics, and stubborn, but he was always willing to edit a paper or discuss a project. His wit was legendary. He was quick to laugh, quick to smile, and always ready with a movie or a song quote. In addition to these essentials, he loved all kinds of music and made sure to introduce us to other classics, from the Beatles to the Eagles to the Allman Brothers. Dad also enjoyed musicals, some more than others. Long car rides from Rochester to visit his mom in New Jersey consisted of soundtracks to Les Mis, Miss Saigon, and Jesus Christ Superstar, and of course Shrek. He deeply, deeply disliked Rent because he was so bored, and he called it the one where Mimi died. And he hated The Sound of Music because according to him, he was forced to see the movie so many times as a kid. The Sound of Mucus, he called it, complete with a theatrical, racking cough to prove his point. Mel Brooks and Monty Python's were his two comedic pillars, even if we were too young to understand the humor at first. The Holy Grail, History of the World Part 1, and Robin Hood Men in Tights are family favorites. He would cackle at the same parts every time as if seeing it for the first time, and would look at me to see if I was laughing too. One of his favorite parts was Billy Crystal's role in The Princess Bride. "It cracks me up every time," he would say. And the movie is one of my favorites, probably in part because he loved it so much, and he quoted it in his speech at my wedding. Also at our wedding, before the ceremony, Dad turned to my husband and said very seriously, referring to the breaking of the glass, "This is the last time you'll put your foot down, so don't miss." Dad loved to travel, roller coasters, gardening, all types of food, and a good red wine or an IPA. He was an amateur photographer, a hobby passed down from his own father, Irving, who served as a reconnaissance photographer in the South Pacific in World War II. When Grandma Ruth passed and we were going through the house, Dad found hundreds of old Army photos in Grandpa Irving's dark room, including many that were redacted from the Army days. Years later, it became our special project. I wrote my senior thesis in college about Grandpa's service, and Dad painstakingly scanned and restored photos of camp life in the jungles of New Guinea, aerial reconnaissance topography, and basic training so that I could create a site online where the pictures and stories could live. I had always planned to create a photo book out of the project as a permanent memento of his dad's service and the hobby they shared, but I never got around to it, and now I wish I had. Dad traveled for work quite a bit, speaking at conferences and meetings all over the world. Mom met up with him as often as she could, and together they explored Greece, Portugal, Hawaii, Copenhagen, and more. As digital cameras became popular, he could be counted on to take hundreds, if not thousands, of photos, and he and Mom would painstakingly review them and spend hours creating photo books of their memories. I'm sure it's not a surprise that my dad was never great at sitting still, especially when traveling. He preferred to explore a city or go to a museum than sit at a pool, opting to see, experience, and taste the world around him. Our first family trip outside of North America was to London, and a few years later we went to Israel. I'll never forget my dad's huge smile when he ordered a lafa shawarma with chlug and extra pickles on Ben Yehuda Street. Years later, on a family trip to Italy in 2014, every museum elicited the same reaction. "Wow, isn't this cool? Look at the ceiling." Dad had a long career in vaccine research and development, and as you've heard, he held over 20 patents. He was an early employee at Praxis Biologics after he finished his postdoc, and we recently learned that he accepted the job sight unseen, never having been to Rochester. Thank God he did. One of his former colleagues called him the best boss she ever had, and I believe it. One of my clearest memories is from first grade, when Dad came to Parent Show and Tell. And what did he show up with? Blown up images of cells and bacteria. And Mom told me yesterday that that's what he talked about on their first date. Sadly, Even though I was introduced to such concepts at a young age, science was never my forte, much to his chagrin. Thus, he wasn't particularly surprised when both of his kids majored in history. So you can imagine how thrilled he was when my husband took microbiology and pharmacology in dental school, and he finally had someone to talk science with. Community was everything to Dad, and growing up, Temple Bethel, this room, was a second home. He was a regular gabbai, greeter, Torah reader, and volunteer. He helped build the sukkah, served on the board, and my parents were members, and still are, of the Commitments Havurah, a group that remains close to this day and vital to my own sense of community. Volunteering at the Jewish home on Christmas with the Havurah was a cherished tradition, again becoming even more poignant after he moved there in February. Dad also loved sports, soccer, tennis, college football, and basketball, and most of all, baseball. Golf, however, it was like watching paint dry, he would say. A lifelong Yankees fan, he was jokingly horrified when I went to college in Boston, dreaded Red Sox territory, and he said if I ever came home with enemy paraphernalia, he would disown me. Years later, he finally consented to take in a game at Fenway Park for my graduation. He played tennis and long bike rides and skiing. The latter was a treasured family tradition. Growing up in Rochester, the nearest mountain is more of a small hill, but that's where we went as often as we could. And once Mom decided that skiing wasn't for her or her knees, Matt, Dad, and I continued on racing down the mountain. When we moved to New City, the nearest mountain was 2 hours away, so skiing became less frequent, but no less treasured. A few times a season, we would get up before dawn to pack, schlep, and layer, and as we got older, it was an annual Christmas Day tradition. Mom got the house to herself, and while we would come home back exhausted and sore, we would feast on kosher Chinese food. He also loved to cook, and the agreement he and my mom had was that he would handle the main courses while Mom made the sides and the desserts. The only thing he didn't do was bake, although after they moved back to Rochester, he occasionally joined my mom in the temple kitchen to make many, many cookie trays. Saturday mornings meant pancakes, especially the singular Martha pancake, which was 90% chocolate chips and 10% batter. He also forayed into beer brewing and hot sauce making, the latter making our basement smell so bad that he was banned from ever doing it again. But his love of beer continued on, and he never turned down the chance for a good drink. 7 years ago, Dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and progressive aphasia. Hope doesn't lend itself well to Alzheimer's. There are few treatments and no cure. And in the absence of hope, as he slowly and then quickly lost bits and pieces of himself, I learned to treasure every moment, every laugh, every hug and conversation, and most of all, the sound of his voice. I will forever see him walking around this sanctuary with his colorful talit that my mom handmade him, with the Jerusalem skyline that many of you know, a smile on his face as he sang the prayers that he loved most. The messages we've received this week echo what I've always known. Dad's humor, warmth, and kindness left a lasting impression, as did his Bruceisms and nicknames. He made people feel seen and valued. He will be dearly, dearly missed, and I will carry him with me always.
Wow. Well, I have a lot of, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm Lois. I'm Bruce's younger sister. I've known him my whole life. And I have a bunch of notes, and I might go a little off script. You won't know the difference because you don't know what I wrote, but I've always looked up to Bruce, and no, it's not just because he's so much taller than I. Okay, maybe not always, because when I was really young, I was just his annoying little sister, and he didn't really want to have too much to do with me. But things started changing when I also got interested in photography. And as Jordana mentioned, my dad, the chemist, was a photography hobbyist, and he created a darkroom in our basement. And Judy, I know you're listening. My older sister could not be here today. She's here with us in our hearts too. But she wasn't as interested in photography. She had other hobbies that she shared, but Bruce and I both really liked photography, and my dad taught us how to develop film. So I started having more in common with Bruce, and that enabled me to have more and more conversations with him. So the more interests we shared, the closer we became. But I really believe that Bruce finally recognized me, that I wasn't a little kid anymore, when I was studying microbiology in college, and we could talk on common ground. And I was fascinated by things medical. I became a medical technologist, and we ended up having some really in-depth conversations after that, like really in-depth. And I know that many of you know he was a very gifted microbiologist, and all of us are very proud of all of the work he did on vaccines. And I can't really add too much to what Jordana already said about that. And taking a little bit more on the humor aspect, which everyone who knew Bruce knew that he was funny, witty, sometimes sarcastic, dry sense of humor. When I was younger, I used to think that some of his humor reminded me a little bit of Alan Alda's character in MASH, Hawkeye Pierce. But Bruce was actually a little funnier, sometimes annoying with his humor, because he would say things at inappropriate times and expect you to laugh. And Jordana already mentioned the Monty Python, but he also liked the Three Stooges and other things. But he did pass his love of Monty Python on to both Matt and Jordana. I shared that love. And one of the favorite skits of his from Monty Python was called The Bruces. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or not, but it's about this convention where everyone there is named Bruce. And they are Bruce, hello Bruce, Bruce, it's nice to meet you, Bruce. And then one guy brings a guy and he says, oh, I'd like you to introduce you to my friend Michael. And they all just stop and stare at each other, and they're like, do you mind if we call you Bruce? And Bruce just always cracked up and loved it. I think it was because they chose his name, but that was one of his favorite skits. So recently, I was able to visit with Bruce, and I'm so grateful that I was able to be here for Thanksgiving. And I went to see him the day before Thanksgiving, and knowing that I was coming, I created a playlist for him. And one of the items I put on that playlist was that Monty Python skit. And when I turned that on, he had been kind of slumped a little bit in his wheelchair. And when he heard that skit, he picked his head up, he looked at me, and his eyes got really wide. So I knew that there was some kind of spark there. And then continuing on the playlist, I played a little bit of The Doors' Light My Fire, because I picked songs that I knew he liked. And he started like moving his head a little, kind of looked over to the side, and Martha and I were fascinated, and Hannah was with me. He kind of started moving his mouth like he was trying to, not sing, but he was mouthing something. And that made me feel a little bit of warmth. But what really hit me, the best thing about that visit that I will cherish forever, was the way he looked at Martha. And that smile, like out of nowhere, and that picture that Lori put on the Caring Bridge, I took that day, and I will forever remember the way he looked at her. And speaking of Martha, I have to say, and I've said it to other people, marrying her was the best decision Bruce ever made in his entire life, and he made a lot of really good decisions. Judy and I gained a sister, and we cannot, I hold it together, we cannot thank Martha enough for loving him and her dedication, her compassion, and above all, her patience. I don't know how she handled it with such grace all these years. So to me and to Judy, today isn't just about remembering Bruce and the kind, intelligent, caring guy that he was, but it's also about honoring Martha, who gave so much of herself to allow Bruce to live his final years with dignity and love, and suffering from a condition that took so much away from him and all who loved him. And I hope that Jordana and Matt, that you really know how much he loved you and how proud he was of both of you. So, to Bruce and to Martha, thank you.
Thank you, Jordana and Lois, for a beautiful tribute. We now call upon friends, cousin and friend Len and Ron to speak.
Bruce's mom and my mom were identical twins and remained close their entire lives. Genetically speaking, Bruce, my brother Jerry, and I are half siblings. We have a big, loving, extended family that includes 13 first cousins, and that doesn't include all the spouses at this point. Bruce was right in the middle of the pack, number 7, with 6 older and 6 younger cousins. It's hard to believe, but as a child, Bruce was very small. He didn't reach his 6+ foot stature until he was in college. As a young boy, he took a lot of teasing from Arthur and Jerry, the elder 2 of the 4 boy cousins. Every Sunday, all the aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered at Grandma's house in Bayonne, New Jersey. We also got together for Thanksgiving at Bruce's house in Roselle and at my parents' house for Passover. My father always led the Seder entirely in Hebrew, and he did it very fast. He would stop abruptly, point to a cousin, and say, "Bruce, what's the next word?" Of course, Bruce always got it right. Those of us fortunate enough to have cousins know that they really are your first best friends. We grew up together and have stayed close and shared many happy times together. Bruce wasn't just my cousin. Our lives were intertwined from the beginning. Our families blended in a way that made us feel more like siblings than cousins. Bruce's spirit will live on in our family, in our stories, and in the love we'll carry forward in his name.
So I hope I get through this. I'm going to do the best I can. So my name is Ron Schwartz, and I'm Bruce's first cousin. And, you know, the last time I spoke at a funeral was probably at my parents' funeral, which is probably almost 30 years ago. So obviously it's not something I like to do, but sometimes you have to say something and you feel that there's something you need to say, and if you don't do it, you're going to regret it. And I just couldn't regret not speaking to you today. So here I am. So I'm a doctor, and I'm a doctor that takes care of older people. And I have so many patients that have dementia, that have Alzheimer's disease. And over the 40 years that I've practiced, every day I have multiple patients with Alzheimer's disease. And about 10 years ago, I got a big honor, and I got appointed to a committee in Connecticut, and it was the Scientific Advisory Committee for the Alzheimer's chapter for Connecticut. And it was a big deal. This is a committee where there were major researchers from Yale, neurobiologists, and University of Connecticut. And you have to get nominated, and the committee looks over your credentials and sees if you qualify to be part of this committee, what you can bring to them. And they accepted me, and I started to attend these meetings. And really what they involved were these major researchers from Yale and UConn, and I'd sit and listen. And I was really excited as I started to go through these meetings. And then after a bit of time, I started to say, you know, why am I here? You know, I'm not a researchist. I'm not a major scientist. I see patients. I'm a doctor. You know, I don't know what I'm contributing. And I really questioned myself. And then about 6 months ago, I got an email, not just me, but all members of this committee. And the email was from a new medical director who was taking over. And they said, we have to look at the roles of members of the committee and, you know, look to yourselves. What do you bring to the committee? You know, why do you want to stay on the committee? And if it's not the right committee for you, that's okay, but let us know. And I thought to myself, I kind of had like that bittersweet moment where you think to yourself, well, maybe this is good. I don't really think I belong anyway. I'll just tell them I'm not going to do this anymore. And then there was a part of me that regretted that, and I felt like if I stopped and I didn't do it, I'd be letting myself down and patients down. So they had a Zoom meeting, and of course they went around with the Zoom meeting, and different doctors started talking. One doctor was talking about all his research, you know, in the tau protein and the beta amyloid plaques and the monoclonal antibodies for treatment and so forth. And I was thinking, man, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And I thought of Bruce. And when my turn came up, I told Bruce's story to the committee. And I said, I have this cousin, brilliant cousin, PhD, has a postdoctorate degree, research he did, the international meetings that he presented at, and the devastating effect of this disease that it had on him and our family. Oh boy. And I said, I need to stay on this committee. I need to stay on this committee for Bruce. So I stand here today talking to you to try to give you hope and to try to give you peace. That I'm never going to stop trying to fight whatever I can do, whatever I am, whoever I can work with, to find a cure for this devastating disease and to give peace and dignity back to the patients and families that are so devastated by it. So I just want to say to Bruce, thank you. Thank you for helping me find my spirit and my will to stay in the fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine and Ron. We gather today with hearts full of memory and gratitude to honor a remarkable soul, someone who lived at the sacred intersection of faith, science, and discovery. Our tradition teaches us, Chokhmah begoim ta'amim, wisdom is found among all people, and yet some individuals seem to possess an extra measure of intelligence and wisdom. This light illuminates and enhances the world through both service and intellect. And Bruce embodied exactly that, service and intellect. And Judaism has never feared questions. Our faith is built on them. Abraham asked questions. Moses asked questions. The sages of the Talmud ask questions endlessly, because asking is a sign of caring. It's a sign of probing in a way to honor God's creation, and seeking understanding brings us closer to that truth. Scientists like Bruce live by this calling. For them, science is not just a profession, but an act of reverence, an effort to understand the laws that the Holy One wove into the fabric of the universe. Bruce believed, as Maimonides taught, that the more one explores the wonders of creation, the more one becomes filled with awe. Every equation, every experiment, every discovery, every vaccination, every patent was part of his lifelong conversation with the world, an expression of curiosity, humility, and devotion. But beyond the laboratory, beyond the conferences and publications, was a human being of great warmth, compassion, and depth. Bruce pursued knowledge not for prestige, but for service, to make life better, to solve real problems, and to help others flourish. He embodied the teaching of Tikkun Olam in its most primitive sense, a call to make and repair this world through patience, research, ethical courage, and unwavering commitment to truth. He also carried his Jewish identity with pride, whether through coming to the minyan, the rituals of the high holidays, the love of being a Gabbai, the love of learning, supporting the community, or the values he lived by. Bruce showed that a Jewish life is not defined solely by observance. It's by study, by character, but how we treat each other, and how one walks through the world, and how one leaves a change for a better life, for a better world after one passes. Bruce's life and career. Bruce was born in New Jersey and moved to Rochester in 1983 after completing his postdoctoral work in microbiology. Unsure at first whether he pursue academia or industry, he ultimately entered vaccine development and worked for several pharmaceutical companies, enduring multiple acquisitions until retiring from Pfizer in 2015. He became a world expert in otitis media, the middle ear infections, and held more than 20 patents throughout his careers. Well known on the conference circuit, Bruce traveled the world, lecturing, collaborating, and forming lifelong friendships. His upbringing was modern Orthodox. He was the middle of 3 siblings. He loved history, and one of his professors even tried to persuade him to become a history professor. But Bruce felt science would allow him to support a family more securely, and so he dedicated his life to research. When he accepted the position of a small biotech company here in Rochester, as we heard from Jordana, he had no idea what he was getting into. The lab was even not set up completely, but with his intervention, with his work, it grew to have 25 people in it. When Bruce met Martha, as we heard, it was at the JCC, at the singles group, where they would play volleyball and get together. And the two met, and one of the first things came out of Bruce's mouth was, "Martha, I keep kosher." And if you want to have a relationship with me, you will have to keep kosher. Martha came from a different part of our Jewish tradition, more liberal, but you said, all right. And then both of you formed this beautiful, beautiful family, married in this sanctuary, giving birth to wonderful children, Jordana and Matthew. Family meant everything to Bruce, and he cherished every moment with his family and extended family and friends. Bruce's intense intellectual focus was what also deeply involved him as a father. He attended his children's sporting events and school activities, sometimes disagreeing with the teachers, but encouraging every interest you could have. And you turn out to be your own personalities with your own tastes, sharp as your father, and loving movies and quotes from movies, And as we heard, he possessed an extraordinary memory for trivia. His interests were even wider. All what we heard about photography, tennis, skiing, reading, gardening, cooking, and having a cold beer on a summer night. The traveling and the learning the language, the place you're visiting, so he could ask for the bill in the right way. He served on the boards of Jewish education, the Jewish Home, Temple Bethel, other temples, devoted to the daily minyan, being part of even 3 chavurot at a time together with Martha, and also always volunteering. We remember his participation during the building of the sukkah here for so many years. His illness and resilience. Even a year ago, Bruce insisted on coming to the minyan. And the minyaneers embraced him. Sherm and Marvin and many others helped Bruce to put on his talis and tefillin. Sometimes he will do it right and sometimes not. But he was proud to be the second person to be called to the Torah. And he came every time, and we helped him to say the blessings. And he felt a sense of pride doing that. He'd been diagnosed in 2018 after struggling to find the right words. It was during a Passover Seder where the family were together, where Jordana realized that Bruce was having trouble reading the Haggadah, something unthinkable for someone who had studied Talmud for so many years, both in person and remotely. During his illness, he lost significant weight and grew increasingly frail. And yet, he never lost his essence, his humor, his warmth, his gentleness. Ruth would have, according to the family, would have wished to be remembered as funny, intelligent, kind, loving of Judaism. Someone who cared about people. Someone who enjoyed being a PhD but didn't take it too seriously. And in fact, he will do this science because he didn't have to wear a tie. So every evening when he came home, he would go through the front door and he would call out, "Honey, I am home." He went to the gym, he took care of himself, and as we heard before, he enjoyed movies and enjoyed shows. He spoke French with some level, Yiddish, Hebrew. As we said, he enjoyed music, jazz, classical rock, and he enjoyed also playing the saxophone. In the musical era, he liked some of them, but please, no Rent. That's the one he didn't like. You guys enjoy it, but he didn't. But this music and this way of being carried to his family with the lullabies and the Shema and part of the service he taught his children when he put them to sleep. It was that ability to connect. And this carried forward as he was so open to receive Jonathan and Andrew, always trying to help, always trying to be connected with both of you. Dear Martha, you carried so much on your shoulders. You walked a long and difficult road with Bruce, and you did it with dignity, with patience and love. Caring for someone with Alzheimer's is an act of profound love. You gave him comfort. You gave him safety. You gave him companionship when he needed it the most. But now Bruce's struggle is over. It's over, and your love remains. To Jordana, to Jonathan, to Matthew and Andrew, to his sisters, Judy and Lois, his in-laws, Sharon and Michael, Steve and Rachel, Susan, Christopher, and the many cousins, nieces, nephews, and dear friends. We can say that the life of Bruce was a remarkable one. We appreciate your endless love and encouragement through his illness. To his friends and colleagues and synagogues, we can say that he was a remarkable Jew for whom Judaism had to be lived actively and participating. He brought so much to this world, not just to fix the world, not just to make it better, but to make it better, funnier, and more caring. He served the scientific community with his intellect, and he served our Jewish community with a great spirit. And now, as difficult as it is, as we say goodbye, we remember the words of the Proverbs. Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam. The soul of a human being is the lamp of the Lord. Bruce's lamp burned brightly, illuminating minds and warming hearts and lighting a path of integrity and purpose. That light does not go out. It will continue in the knowledge he shared. It will continue in the vaccines he developed. It will continue in the lives he touched, the love he gave, and the legacy he leaves behind. May the soul of Beryl Israel Ben Yitzchak Halevi Verachel always be remembered for a blessing. May his neshama continue to inspire us to ask, to seek, to learn, and to help heal this world. And let us say all together, Amen. It's my honor to call upon Rabbi Goldstein to recite Kel Maleh. Kindly rise.
El Maleh Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tahorim, Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Beryl Yisrael Ben Yitzchak Halevi Verachel, Shehalach Le'olamo, Began Eden Tehei Menuchato, Ana Bal Harachamim, Hastirehu Beseter Knafecha Le'olamim, Utzror B'tzorachayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar, Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Bruce Green, of Beryl Yisrael Ben Yitzchak Halevi Verachel, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.